At our anniversary dinner, I gifted my wife a mysterious box, but to my shock, my wife put it aside and insulted me by calling me jobless who couldn't live on my own. My daughter added, "We don't need your cheap gift. Take it and get out." I couldn't help but laugh and told them what was inside the box. Now they won't stop calling, begging. I stood there in our dimly lit dining room, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and nerves. It was our 15th anniversary, and I'd spent the whole day planning this dinner to remind Clarissa how much we still had together, how much I still loved her despite everything. The kids, well, just Marley now since she was the only one still at home, were supposed to be part of this too, a family moment. I'd even gone out and bought a small gift, nothing flashy, just something meaningful. My hands shook a little as I set the tiny box on the table in front of Clarissa wrapped in simple silver paper with a red ribbon I'd tied myself. I'd practiced what I'd say all morning. 15 years, babe. We've made it through a lot. This is for you. But before I could even get the words out, she glanced at it, then at me, and rolled her eyes so hard I could almost hear them creak. "You're still jobless," she said, her voice sharp like a knife cutting through the warm air. "You couldn't even afford a decent gift, could you?" I froze, my mouth half open, the words I'd rehearsed dying in my throat. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this wasn't about money, that I'd poured my heart into this night. But then Marley piped up from across the table, her teenage sneer cutting deeper than her mother's words. "We don't need your cheap box, Dad. Take it and get out." She didn't even look up from her phone, just flicked her fingers like I was some annoying fly buzzing around her perfect life. I stared at them both, my wife, my daughter, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The candles flickered on the table, casting shadows that danced across their faces, and for a second, I couldn't move. My chest tightened, and I thought about yelling, about flipping the table, about demanding they at least open the damn thing and see what I'd done for them. But instead, something else came over me. I laughed. Not a big loud laugh, just a quiet chuckle that slipped out before I could stop it. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, Clarissa's eyebrows shooting up, Marley finally glancing away from her screen. "You sure about that?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, almost playful. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, watching them squirm just a little. They didn't know what was in that box. They didn't know what I'd been hiding, what I'd been building while they wrote me off. Clarissa shoved the box back toward me with the back of her hand, like it was trash, and stood up. "Get out," she said, her tone flat and final. Marley nodded, smirking like she'd want something. I grabbed the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked to the door without another word. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I heard the lock click behind me. My car was parked in the driveway, the same beat-up sedan I'd been driving for years, and I slid into the driver's seat, the box resting on my lap. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, proof of everything they'd thrown away. I started the engine and pulled out, the streetlights blurring past me as I drove into the night. A week later, my phone started buzzing. Clarissa's name flashed on the screen, then Marley's, over and over. Voicemails piled up, texts too, but I didn't answer. I just sat there in my borrowed room at Uncle Reuben's place, sipping coffee, staring at the little box on the table in front of me. They'd figure it out soon enough. They'd realize what they'd pushed away. And when they did, I'd be ready. Not with anger, not with tears, but with the quiet strength I'd been holding on to all along. I leaned back in the chair, letting the phone vibrate again, and smiled to myself. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. 10 years ago, life felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from, and I can still see it so clearly when I close my eyes. I was standing in the kitchen of our old house, the one with the creaky floors and the big bay window, flipping pancakes while Marley giggled at the table, her little hands sticky with syrup. She was 6'10", all wide eyes and messy pigtails, begging me to make the pancakes into Mickey Mouse shapes. "Daddy, make his ears bigger," she'd say. And I'd laugh, pouring extra batter just to see her smile. Clarissa would come in, still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess from sleep, and she'd wrap her arms around me from behind, kissing my neck like we were still newlyweds. "You're spoiling her," she'd tease, but her voice was warm, full of love. Back then, I was somebody, running my own engineering firm, small but growing, pulling in contracts that paid for that house, the vacations, the life we had. I'd built it all from scratch, late nights sketching designs, early mornings pitching to clients. And it felt good to see Clarissa proud of me, to hear Marley brag to her friends about her dad's cool job. I thought we were unbreakable, the three of us, a team against the world. But then the deal went bad. It was one big project, a bridge redesign for the city, and I'd sunk everything into it, every dollar, every hope. When the client pulled out last minute, claiming budget cuts, my firm took the hit. Creditors came knocking, bills piled up, and I had to let my team go one by one until it was just me in an empty office, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring. I sold the company for pennies, just enough to keep us afloat, but the damage was done. Clarissa's warmth faded first. She stopped hugging me in the mornings, stopped asking how my day was. "You need to figure this out," she'd say, her voice clipped, like I was a problem she had to solve. I tried. I took freelance gigs, fixed cars on the side, even drove for one of those rideshare apps, but it was never enough. The house went into foreclosure, and we moved into a smaller place, a rental with thin walls and a leaky roof. Marley was 10 by then, and I noticed her pulling away too. She'd roll her eyes when I tried to read her stories at night, muttering, "I'm not a baby, Dad," and I'd laugh it off, thinking it was just growing up, but it wasn't. She started copying Clarissa, parroting her complaints. "Why can't we have nice things anymore?" And I'd catch them whispering sometimes, glancing at me like I was the outsider. I kept hustling, picking up odd jobs, anything to put food on the table, but in their eyes, I wasn't the man I used to be. They didn't see the hours I spent trying to rebuild, the nights I stayed up worrying about how to make it right. They saw the fancy life I'd given them before, the big house, the trips to the coast, the clothes, and they loved that, not me. I'd come home from a long day, hands greasy from fixing someone's engine, and Clarissa wouldn't even look up from her phone. "You smell like oil," she'd say, wrinkling her nose, and Marley would giggle like it was a joke. I'd stand there in the doorway, feeling smaller every time, wondering where my family went. I tried talking to Clarissa once, late at night when Marley was asleep. "We can get through this," I said, reaching for her hand across the couch. She pulled away, her eyes cold. "You lost everything, Tom. What's there to get through?" That stung worse than anything, worse than losing the firm because I realized she didn't believe in me anymore. Marley stopped asking for pancakes, stopped calling me Daddy. She'd walk past me in the hall, earbuds in, like I was invisible. I kept going, though, scraping by, telling myself it'd get better, that they'd see I was still fighting for them. But deep down, I knew something had broken, something I couldn't fix with hard work or time. They didn't want the man I was now, just the life I'd lost. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like a itch I couldn't scratch, and it had been gnawing at me for months. It started small, Clarissa coming home later than usual, her heels clicking on the floor past midnight. She'd say it was work, that her job at the marketing firm was demanding more hours, and I'd nod, trying to believe her. "Okay. Just don't burn yourself out," I'd say, forcing a smile, but she'd barely look at me, muttering something about deadlines before disappearing into the bedroom. I wanted to trust her God. I did, but the signs kept piling up, little things that didn't add up. Her perfume lingered stronger some nights, a sharp floral scent that wasn't the one I bought her years ago for Christmas. She'd brush it off if I asked, saying it was a sample from a client, but it stuck with me. That smell, like a stranger had walked through our house. Then there was Marley, my little girl who wasn't so little anymore, 16 now, and acting like I was some kind of burden. She'd always been close to her mom, but lately, she'd gotten worse, rolling her eyes every time I opened my mouth, muttering under her breath when I asked how school was. "You wouldn't get it, Dad," she'd say, her voice dripping with that teenage attitude, but it felt personal, sharper than it used to be. I'd catch her on her phone, texting nonstop, her fingers flying over the screen. And if I walked into the room, she'd tilt it away, whispering into it like I was the enemy. It made my stomach twist, wondering what they were saying about me behind my back. I tried to ignore it, told myself I was paranoid, that losing the company had messed with my head. But then I saw it. The message that cracked everything wide open. It was a Sunday afternoon, and Clarissa had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran to the store. I wasn't snooping, I swear, just grabbing a glass of water, but the screen lit up with a ping. And there it was, bold as day. Dinner at our place next time. Can't wait to see you again. Signed, Gregory, her boss. My heart stopped, then started pounding so hard I thought it'd bust out of my chest. I stood there, staring at those words, my hands shaking around the glass. Gregory, tall, slick, always in those tailored suits, the guy who'd show up at company parties with a grin that made me feel small even when I was still on top. I'd met him a few times, shaken his hand, watched him charm the room while I stood there with my cheap beer. And now he was in my life, in my house, in my wife's head. I clicked the email thread, stupid. Maybe, but I had to know, and it was all there. Months of messages, flirty at first, then outright planning. Lunch tomorrow? Missed you last night. He doesn't suspect a thing. That last one hit me like a punch to the gut. He was me. I was the fool who didn't see it coming. I closed the laptop, my hands sweaty, and sat down hard on a stool, trying to breathe. Clarissa wasn't just cheating. She was building a whole new life without me, and she was dragging Marley into it. I thought back to those whispers, the way Marley smirked when Clarissa brushed me off, how she'd started calling me embarrassing in front of her friends. It wasn't just teenage rebellion. She was learning it, soaking it up from her mom like a sponge. Clarissa wanted out, and she was making sure Marley hated me enough to follow her, to leave me behind without a second thought. I heard the front door open, Clarissa's keys dangling as she walked in, and I stood up, shoving the stool back. She froze when she saw me, her eyes flicking to the laptop, then to my face. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, casual, like nothing was up. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop at her, to demand why him, why now, why us? But I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I didn't know anymore. "Nothing," I said, my voice low, steady. "Just thinking." She shrugged and walked past me, that damn perfume trailing behind her, and I knew right then she wasn't mine anymore. Neither of them were. I couldn't let it sit there, festering inside me like some rotten thing, so I decided to confront her that night. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you until you can't breathe. Marley was upstairs, probably glued to her phone, and Clarissa was in the living room, flipping through a magazine like everything was normal. I stood in the doorway, watching her for a second, her perfect hair, her manicured nails, the way she sat like she owned the world, and I felt this mix of anger and sadness boiling up. I'd seen the emails, I knew about Gregory, and I couldn't pretend anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. She didn't even look up at first, just turned a page and sighed like I was interrupting her. "What now, Tom?" she said, finally glancing at me, her eyes cold and impatient. I took a step closer, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to keep calm. "I know about Gregory," I said, straight out. No dancing around it. "I saw the messages. You're not even trying to hide it anymore, are you?" For a second, she froze, her fingers hovering over the magazine, and I thought maybe she'd deny it, maybe she'd cry or apologize. But then she laughed, sharp and mean, like I told her a bad joke. "Oh, you finally figured it out," she said, tossing the magazine onto the coffee table and leaning back on the couch. "Took you long enough." I stood there, stunned, my mouth dry, waiting for something, anything, to make sense. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "You're just done with me?" "With us." She smirked, crossing her arms, and it was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You think I want to spend my life with a has-been?" she said, every word slicing into me. "Greg takes care of me. He respects me. He's got a future, something you haven't had in years." I wanted to yell, to tell her I'd been trying, that I'd never stop fighting for us. But then Marley's footsteps thudded down the stairs, and she stopped at the bottom, staring at us. Her hair was tied back, her face blank, and she didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. I looked at her, my little girl, hoping she'd say something, anything, to show she still cared. But she didn't. She just crossed her arms like her mom, silent, picking her side without even opening her mouth. Clarissa kept going, like Marley being there made her bolder. "This is his house now," she said, nodding toward the walls I'd painted, the furniture I'd hauled in when we moved here. "Greg's moving in soon. If you want to stay, you better start contributing something useful rent, maybe, since you can't do much else." My head spun, and I felt sick, like the floor was dropping out from under me. His house. This was my home. Our home. The place I'd sweated to keep even after the company tanked. And now she was handing it over to some slick bastard who'd probably never lifted a finger for her the way I had. I looked at Marley again, searching her face for a crack, a hint of the kid who used to hug me goodnight, but she just stared back, her eyes hard, like I was nothing to her. "You agree with this?" I asked her, my voice breaking a little. She shrugged, barely moving her shoulders, and muttered, "Whatever Mom says." That was it, the knife twisting deeper. They teamed up, decided I was disposable, a dead weight they could cut loose. I could have fought, could have screamed that I'd built this life for them, that I loved them through every failure, every late bill, every cold night. But standing there with Clarissa smirking and Marley looking through me, I saw the truth. They didn't care. They hadn't for a long time. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench, and something shifted inside me. Anger turned cold, sharp, like a tool I could use. "Fine," I said, my voice steady now, low and quiet. Clarissa raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to beg or break, but I didn't. I just nodded, slow and deliberate. "You want me gone?" "I'm gone, but you're gonna regret this." She laughed again, waving me off like I was a kid making empty threats, but I wasn't. I turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood, and I didn't look back. Upstairs, I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with some clothes, my toothbrush, a few things I couldn't leave behind. The whole time, I kept thinking not about losing them, but about what I'd do next. They thought I was finished, a washed-up nobody with nothing left. They were wrong. I'd been down before, and I'd climb back up. This time, I'd do it smarter, quieter, and when they realized what they'd thrown away, I'd be the one laughing. I sat on the edge of the lumpy guest bed at Uncle Reuben's place, the little box from the anniversary dinner resting in my hands. And I let my mind drift back to something Clarissa never knew about, something nobody did. Before the company went under, back when I still had a bit of cash and a lot of hope, I'd made a move that seemed crazy at the time. My old college buddy Sanjay had come to me one night, all jittery and excited, practically begging me to invest in his tech startup. "It's a game changer, Tom," he'd said, his eyes wide over beers at some dive bar. "AI software for small businesses. Nobody's doing it like this. I just need seed money to get it off the ground." I'd been doing well then, my firm pulling in steady contracts. So I wrote him a check for $80,000, most of my personal savings, without telling Clarissa. She'd have freaked out, called it a gamble, and maybe she'd have been right. After that, I forgot about it. The company crashed, life got messy, and Sanjay's little project slipped out of my head. I figured it had fizzled out like most startups do, and I wasn't about to dig through old bank statements to check. But 2 years ago, I got a call from him out of the blue. "Tom, you still alive?" He'd laughed, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "Man, you're not gonna believe this. We're going public. That $80,000 you gave me, it's worth something now." I'd been in the middle of fixing a neighbor's lawnmower for $20, grease up to my elbows, and I almost dropped the phone. Turns out, his company had taken off quietly at first, then like a rocket. They built some AI tool that every small business in the country wanted, and when they IPO'd, my shares shot up. I didn't tell anyone, not even Uncle Reuben. I just kept reinvesting, letting it grow, watching the numbers climb in silence while Clarissa and Marley treated me like a loser. Last month, I finally cashed out a chunk of it, enough to make me a multi-millionaire, more money than I'd ever dreamed of back when I was scrambling to pay the rent. I'd moved it into a new account, separate from the joint one Clarissa still dipped into, and I started planning. That box I'd handed her at the dinner, It wasn't some cheap trinket. Inside was a folder, documentation for a new company I'd set up with Sanjay's help, a luxury vacation deed for a beach house I'd bought outright, and a black credit card with no limit tied to my new fortune. I wanted to show her to say, "Look. I'm back better than ever. We can start over." But she didn't even open it, just shoved it away like it was garbage, and Marley backed her up, kicking me out of my own life. Now, sitting in Ruben's spare room, the box felt heavier than it should have. I flipped it open, staring at the papers inside, the sleek black card glinting under the dim lamp. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the weight of what it meant, not just money, but power, a second chance I'd built from nothing. I thought about Clarissa's sneer, Marley's smirk, the way they looked at me like I was less than dirt. They had no idea what I'd been hiding, what I'd turned into while they were busy writing me off. I could have gone back that night, waved the card in their faces, told them I was worth more than Gregory and his fancy suits ever would be, but I didn't. I closed the box, set it on the nightstand, and leaned back against the headboard, the springs creaking under me. Revenge wasn't about flashing cash or rubbing it in. It was about letting them figure it out on their own, watching them squirm when the truth hit. I've been a ghost in their world for years, invisible, useless in their eyes. Now I was something else, a man with a plan, a man they'd underestimated. I pictured Clarissa's face when the bills started bouncing, when Gregory's promises fell apart, when Marley realized her perfect little life wasn't so perfect anymore. I didn't need to yell or fight. I just needed to wait. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet street, the moon hanging low over the trees. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My chest didn't feel tight. For the first time in years, I felt steady, like I was standing on solid ground again. They'd throw me out, sure, but they'd also set me free. And that box, it wasn't just a gift. It was proof I wasn't the man they thought I was. Not anymore. I stood in the kitchen that night, the anniversary dinner spread out on the table, roast chicken cooling, potatoes getting stiff, candles dripping wax onto the cloth I'd ironed just for this. I'd wanted it to be perfect, a chance to show Clarissa we could still fix things, that I wasn't the failure she saw me as. My hands were sweaty as I slid the little box across to her, the one with the papers, the deed, the card, everything I'd been hiding. "Happy anniversary," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be, hoping she'd hear the weight behind it. She barely glanced at it, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. "What's this supposed to be?" she said, pushing it back toward me without even touching the ribbon. Before I could answer, Marley chimed in, her voice sharp and bored. "It's probably junk. Just